Young boy in a wheelchair is abandoned by his stepmother in front of a hospital. Then homeless, he goes in search of his biological mother, but finds something he never imagined. In front of a beautiful house with an impeccable garden stood Peter, a boy of only 14 who used a wheelchair. He looked at the house with an air of nervousness, as if something he had always desired was there, but at the same time, he was afraid to find it. Beside him, Daniel, his caregiver, was also apprehensive, but being older, he tried not to show it to give the boy strength. "Daniel," Peter said nervously, "do you think she'll accept me? I've wanted to meet her for years, but if my mother really wanted me, she would never have abandoned me. Maybe she doesn't want to see me and will even be angry with me for knocking on her door." Daniel, with a serene and calm look, replied, "She's your mother. I'm sure she had her reasons for giving you up. We don't know what happened for her to leave you, so don't be nervous. You're a great kid. I'm sure she'll like you. I'm here by your side and I won't leave. You can count on me for anything." With Daniel's words, Peter calmed down. With his fragile, thin hands, he began to turn the wheels of his chair. Daniel walked slowly beside him, his eyes never leaving the boy, who was sweating with nervousness. They both noticed the beautiful garden, well kept and with various types of roses. The front of the house was pretty and, while exuding a simplicity of detail, also showed an air of refinement and sophistication. The boy, in front of the door, rang the doorbell. When the sound echoed throughout the residence, he felt his heart accelerate. For a second, he thought about turning back, but upon hearing footsteps approaching the door, he realized it was too late to return. The door opened, and a woman in her early 40s appeared. She had a friendly face and, with a soft, welcoming smile, she asked, "Good morning, how can I help you?" Peter stared at her for a few seconds, his voice caught in his throat. He couldn't say anything more. And then, the feelings that couldn't escape his mouth went to his eyes and overflowed. The boy cried, but his face was motionless, as if paralyzed. "My goodness," the woman said. "Are you okay?" She spoke, concerned about the situation. Daniel hadn't intended to say anything, only to accompany the boy to see if he would be all right, but seeing that scene, he had to speak. "Ma'am, we've come from very far away. Peter has been looking for you for a long time. That's why he's so emotional." The woman still didn't understand what was happening. She didn't know who these two were, and the crying boy was making her worried. Peter finally summoned his courage and spoke. "Mom, I've always wanted to meet you. I've been looking for you for so many years. My father always talked about you, but he never let me meet you. All I knew was your name, Rose. I've always wanted to meet you, Mom." Rose, hearing the word mom followed by her name, froze and also cried. Tears streamed down her face, but she remained motionless in front of them. Daniel helped Peter wipe his tears, and meanwhile Rose said, "Please come in. We have a lot to talk about." Peter and Daniel entered Rose's house. The living room was equivalent to the front of the house, with refinement and elegance. All the objects were well arranged, and the light tone and plants brought an air of calm and peace to the house. "I'll get some cookies and juice. Wait a moment," said Rose. Peter was calmer now. He had finally found his mother, the person he most desired to meet in this world. Rose returned with some homemade cookies she had made herself and 2 glasses of passion fruit juice. "Have some of this juice, you're very nervous. This will help calm you down," she said with a calm and compassionate tone. Daniel sat on the comfortable sofa, and Peter settled his wheelchair next to him. The cookies and juice were delicious, making Peter even more emotional to have a mother who cooked well. "You know," Peter began to speak, "this is the first time someone has made something for me since my father passed away. I always had to make my own food," the boy said with an emotional voice. Rose smiled. "And you can eat more if you want." The two exchanged a compassionate smile. But then Rose asked, "Please tell me how you found me. I know you have a lot to say." Peter looked at the floor with a sad gaze and said, "It wasn't easy to find you, Mom. If it weren't for Daniel, I never would have found you. I've been through so much." Rose interrupted him. "Please tell me everything that happened until you got here." I have plenty of time." Then she smiled, making the boy feel more welcomed. 15 years ago, Peter was born. His father, Luke, raised him with great affection and love. Peter was the reason for his life and the reason he kept going. Until the age of 4, it was just Luke and Peter, but soon after, Carol appeared in their lives. Luke and Carol were a couple deeply in love, and soon Carol moved in with them. The couple didn't have much money and lived in a humble rented house. But anyone looking from the outside would say they were a perfect match. Peter remembered a little of that time, when he would run through the streets, play soccer with friends, and feel his legs ache from running so much through the fields. But one day, something changed. His father changed. Gradually, his attitude towards Carol and Peter changed. He was still the same, but his smiles were fainter, and his gaze was always tired. Whenever asked what had happened or what was wrong, Luke would change the subject and tell a joke to distract them. For a while, Carol and Peter stopped asking what had happened and just waited for Luke to be ready to tell them. Peter, however, noticed that Carol had also changed. She still treated him well, just like his father, but she seemed more lifeless, not even smiling at him or her husband anymore. This made Peter sad and confused. He was just a child at the time, but he knew they were hiding something from him. One day, while playing soccer in a field with his friends, the goalkeeper kicked the ball, and one of the players kicked it far away. The ball landed on the other side of a quiet road. All the boys ran after the ball, but Peter was the fastest. He smiled as he picked up the ball and walked back to the field, as he was very tired. Unfortunately, being inattentive because of the quiet street, Peter didn't notice the car coming towards him. The driver, who was using his cell phone while driving, also didn't see Peter. The boys heard a loud crash and the loud screech of tires at high speed. It was the driver who, upon realizing he had hit a child, sped off to avoid being caught. The boys screamed for help, and some of them ran to their homes to find an adult to help Peter. Half an hour later, the ambulance took Peter to the hospital. Luke and Carol couldn't stop crying, fearing they would lose Peter. The boy spent a month in the hospital in a coma. After that time, he woke up. Peter was confused. He didn't remember the accident or how he had ended up there, but his father was by his side, crying tears of happiness that his son had finally woken up. "Dad, what am I doing here?" Peter said with a weak and confused voice. Luke, still crying, said, "You had an accident, son, and you're in the hospital. But everything will be okay now. You'll be fine." "I can't get up," Peter said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's because you're weak, son. You slept for a month, and that's why your legs are weak. But soon you'll be able to run again like you always enjoyed and play soccer with all your friends," Luke said, smiling at his son, who, tired, fell asleep again. Unfortunately, what Peter had wasn't just weakness in his legs. Later exams showed a spinal injury that prevented movement in the boy's legs. The news was devastating for Luke and Carol, but strangely, Peter remained strong. He would play in his wheelchair and say that now he would be a driver and put turbines on the wheels of his chair so he could go faster than everyone. Luke was moved to see how strong his son was. The news of losing movement in his legs could destroy many people's lives, but Peter never shed a tear. He even joked about the situation. "My son," Luke said, "I wish I had half the strength you have. You are my pride and my life. Know that I love you." After a recovery period in the hospital, Peter finally returned home. Peter noticed that his father and Carol now seemed happier, but he felt that something was still wrong. Before his accident, they had been strange, and then they changed. This calmed Peter, who for a moment thought that whatever was bothering them had been resolved. Peter adapted well to the wheelchair and could even play with his friends within possible limits. While playing with one of his best friends, he asked, "Peter, what happened to the car that hit you?" The boy asked curiously. Peter quickly replied, "Nothing. They couldn't find the person who hit me. They don't even know if it was a man or a woman. My dad said this area is quite poor, so there aren't many cameras on the streets. That's why they couldn't find out who it is, and maybe they never will." Incredibly, this didn't shake Peter, who continued his life normally. Carol and Luke didn't know if he was just a strong boy or if his young age brought an innocence to the challenges he might face in the future. None of these events shook Peter. However, something was coming that would shake even his iron determination. One night, waking up from his bed, Peter heard noises coming from the living room. He noticed it was a muffled argument between Carol and Luke. The boy silently got into his wheelchair and slowly wheeled himself to a point where he couldn't be heard or seen. Carol and Luke were in the living room, arguing in aggressive but calm tones so as not to wake Peter. "You have to stay with him, Carol, I beg you. He doesn't have." Luke spoke with a mixture of anger and fear. Carol, nervous and angry, said, "I fell in love with you, Luke. I lived this life by your side only for you, not for him. I'm just his stepmother. I never wanted to raise your son. I don't even think about having a child of my own. Peter has a mother. He can very well stay with her, but you don't even say where she is." A chill ran down his spine. He had asked his father about his mother for years, several times, but he never said anything about her, only that she had left and abandoned them both. Peter didn't know how to interpret this. He didn't know if his mother had passed away or if she had just left him with his father. The boy was confused and scared by his father's words. "You have to stay with him, Carol." Those words were in his mind. Did that mean his father was going to abandon him too, just like his mother? Peter didn't know. Nothing made sense to him, but that shook him. Losing the movement in his legs was easy for him to deal with, but losing his father's love was too much for the little boy. The argument ended, and Peter silently returned to his bed, but that night he didn't sleep well. The next day, Peter found his father at the living room table, pensive, holding his head. The boy went to him and, without mincing words, said, "Dad, are you going to abandon me like my mother did?" Luke's eyes widened, and he went towards his son and said in a strong tone, "My son, I would never do that. You are my life. I exist only for you. I will never abandon you. Why are you saying this? I heard you and Carol arguing. You said she had to stay with me, but she didn't want to," Peter said sadly, unable to look his father in the eyes. Luke received his son's confession like a shock. He wasn't prepared to tell the truth, but he couldn't leave his son in that state. "Son, I love you. A lot is happening. I wanted you to stay out of it and not suffer. I'm sick, and I'm afraid that one day I won't be able to be by your side. That's why I told Carol to stay with you. I would never abandon you." Peter, still sad, said, "Are you going to die, Dad?" Then the boy, who until now was like a rock, an insurmountable wall where no negative emotion passed, collapsed in tears at the thought of losing his father. Luke tried to calm him. "Son, I'm getting treatment. This is the second time this illness has returned. I'm sure I'll be able to get cured again." Luke and Peter hugged each other. Both were emotional and hoped with all their might for the best. The days passed, and Luke seemed increasingly tired. He tried to appear strong in front of his son, but Peter noticed that his father was making an effort so he wouldn't suffer. Peter, who was already loving, became an even more loving boy to his father. He made his breakfast, tidied the house, and studied to show his father the best grades. "You are my pride, son." After a few months, Luke, who was thin, pale, and without his hair, called Peter. "Son, come here, I have something to show you. Look at this box. There are several pictures of me when I was younger and also pictures of you when you were a baby." Luke and Peter talked for hours. The father recounted various moments of his life through the photos in that box. Luke felt that his time to depart was near, and so he wanted to spend as much time as possible with his son. Peter noticed that despite the various photos, none of them had a woman who could be his mother. But one photo that his father didn't show him, and which was even a bit hidden inside the box, showed Luke embracing a young woman who appeared to be his age. Peter took the photo, and with a twinkle in his eyes and a smile on his lips, he asked, "Is this my mother?" Luke, caught by surprise, not even remembering that photo, looked at Peter. The boy, who had been through so much in recent years, showed contagious joy looking at that photo. Speaking very softly and with a sad look, Luke said, Yes, she is your mother. Peter's eyes filled with tears of happiness at finally seeing a photo of his mother. Her name is Rose. She's an incredible woman, Luke said. However, a severe cough hit him right after. Carol, seeing that her husband was not well, took him to the hospital, where the doctors admitted him. For days, Luke remained hospitalized and rarely received visits from Peter, as the doctors did not approve of such a young child entering a hospital inpatient environment. It's very dangerous for him. I know it may be cruel to keep a father away from his son, but if he catches any bacteria or virus, it would be fatal for the boy, the doctors would say, trying to protect Peter's health. The young boy spent his days alone at home, holding his mother's photo and praying for his father to return. However, one day, the news he feared most arrived. Luke had passed away. For days he fought, but the illness took his life. Peter received condolences from various people, but nothing he heard lessened his pain. He stayed by his father's coffin the whole time until finally returning home. After Luke's departure, Peter was left alone with his stepmother, Carol. She treated him well and showed affection and concern for the boy's emotional state. However, this didn't last long. The pain of grief still burned strongly in her chest, and she could no longer hold back her tears in front of Peter. Over time, the woman seemed to become an empty shell without the presence of her beloved husband. Months later, Peter noticed Carol worried in the living room. She was looking at several papers and whispering, "How am I going to pay for all this?" What Peter didn't know was that Carol didn't have a steady job, and after Luke's loss, their financial situation had become even worse. One dark night, where the moonlight was the brightest source of light, Carol said she wasn't feeling very well. "Peter, I need to go to the hospital. Get some of your things and come with me." The two took a bus and went to the furthest hospital in the city. Arriving in the courtyard behind the hospital, an isolated area with little lighting, Carol said, "Stay here, I'll go for a consultation." Peter found it strange that he wasn't going in, but since it wasn't the first time he had been denied entry to a hospital, he didn't argue. Carol then proceeded to the front of the hospital and disappeared after passing the wall. Peter waited. Seconds turned into minutes, minutes turned into hours, and the hours made the day dawn. The sun was rising, bright and warm, but Peter felt a coldness in his heart. The back door of the hospital opened, and a man came out. "What are you doing here, boy? Where are your parents?" "My name is Daniel. What's yours?" Peter then told Daniel everything that had happened, and Daniel quickly understood the situation. "It's going to be okay, kid. I'll help you." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest seeing the boy's sad face, and even more so in a wheelchair. Daniel took him to the staff cafeteria, where everyone was shocked and outraged by the young boy's abandonment. Daniel served Peter a meal, and he devoured it, as he was very hungry. Sometime later, the police arrived, as did Child Protective Services. Carol had left Peter at the hospital because the next day they were going to be evicted from the house due to non-payment of rent. Carol also didn't want to stay with Peter. She only wanted Luke, but her beloved had passed away. Without the courage to tell the boy she wouldn't stay with him, and instead of handing him over for adoption, Carol, in a cowardly and thoughtless act, thought it best to abandon him at the hospital. "Someone will take care of him here," she thought before leaving him alone in that place. The police found Carol a few days later living at her mother's house. She faced charges and received a few months' sentence for child abandonment. Meanwhile, Peter found himself within the walls of an orphanage. The place was full of children, some good and others not so much. Peter took almost nothing from his old residence, only the box with photos of his father. He slept hugging the photo of his father and his mother and kept imagining what his life would be like if they were still there with him. A few days after entering the orphanage, Peter received a visit he never imagined. It was Daniel, the caregiver who had helped him at the hospital. "Hello, Peter," Daniel said with a wide smile on his face. "I brought some things for you. I hope they help. They're clothes and a new wheelchair. Yours is very old." Peter smiled upon seeing a familiar face. His whole life had changed, and any contact with someone friendly made him smile. For days, Daniel visited the boy until one day he gave Peter great news. "Peter," Daniel began to speak, "I left my old job at that hospital. I spoke with the orphanage director and found out they were hiring for the orphanage infirmary because the old nurse retired. I submitted my resume, and they hired me." Peter let out a cry of happiness and hugged Daniel. "You did this for me?" the boy asked. Daniel looked thoughtful and said, "I did it for you, but also because it's better for me here, and I'll also earn more." Peter looked him in the eyes and said, "I'll feel much more at home with you here." Daniel smiled back, happy with what he heard. What Daniel was hiding was that he did this thinking only of Peter. He wanted to be able to help the boy in any way and be more present. The new job at the orphanage paid half the salary he earned at the hospital, but what he wanted was for Peter to be happy. Daniel's presence made everything much easier for Peter, and over time, he managed to smile again. But life still had another surprise for him. While he was alone, strolling through the orphanage garden, someone called his name. It was Carol, his stepmother. Carol had a sad and regretful look. "What are you doing here?" Peter asked. "First of all, I'm sorry for that day," Carol said, her voice failing. "Losing Luke was too much for me. I should have been braver and called Child Protective Services to take you, but I didn't have the courage. You have his eyes, and just looking at them hurts me." Peter remained quiet, but Carol continued speaking. "I spent a few months in prison for what I did. When I got out, they gave me some things that were in the house, like documents, some furniture, nothing very important. But there was something I had forgotten. Before your father died, he wrote a letter. He made me promise not to open it and to give it to you. In the midst of grief and the funeral, I ended up losing the letter. But when I got out of prison, they gave me everything that was inside the house where we lived, and along with all that, there was this letter. I couldn't keep my promise, and I read it yesterday. Here it is. I'm sure it will interest you. Once again, I'm sorry." Carol, after handing over the letter, turned around and disappeared, just like the other time. Peter opened the letter and it said, "Son, as I write this, I feel that I will soon depart. I am worried about your future. I only recently realized that Carol was not the ideal woman to take care of you. However, there is one person who will surely take good care of you. Your mother. I'm sorry for hiding her whereabouts all this time, but it was necessary. Your mother's name is Rose. She lives at 123 Flower Street. She is a person with a big heart. I'm sure she will give you what you need." After reading the letter, Peter cried, missing his father, but at the same time, he was happy to finally know where his mother was. The sentence, "Carla June 2 esse problema ao de também neo quer ficar com Pierre ela queria apenas Lucas Mosso acu a modo havia falecido," seems like a misplaced repeat from earlier context and doesn't fit here logically with the letter's content. I'll omit it as it breaks the flow of Peter's reaction to the letter. Returning to the present, Peter finished telling the whole story to Rose. Rose stood up at once, and tears wouldn't stop falling from her face. "Excuse me, I just need a minute." Rose went to the kitchen and cried. She didn't know what to do. After a few minutes, she returned. Rose hugged Peter tightly. "You are a strong boy. I've never met anyone with such determination as you." Peter smiled upon hearing these kind words from his mother. She returned to the sofa and sat down. "I also have something to tell you. I hope you understand my side." Peter and Daniel listened attentively to what Rose was saying. Several years ago, Rose was a young woman about to graduate from medical school. At the time, she was dating Kevin. They had known each other since childhood, and when they spread the news they were dating, no one was surprised. It was as if one was born for the other. Rose was finishing medical school, but Kevin hadn't yet entered any college. He was also having difficulty finding a job, but Rose always helped him. "Kevin, you'll get a job and graduate. I'm sure of it, my love," she would tell him. Kevin, however, became a quiet and increasingly cold man. Rose tried to understand her boyfriend's side. It couldn't be easy for him to go through all that. Rose tried to support him in the best way she could, but Kevin remained strange and cold. One day, arriving home, she heard Kevin talking on the phone. "Soon I'll be with you, darling. I miss you." Rose was shocked to hear such words, but she swallowed her anger for a few minutes because she needed to confirm if she wasn't going crazy. When Kevin noticed Rose's presence, he froze and greeted her warmly. "Hello, my love. I didn't notice you arriving. How was college?" Rose gave a fake smile and said, "It was great, my love, but I'm so tired. Could you make me dinner? I'm really, really tired." "Of course, sweetheart. I'll do it right now." Kevin went to the kitchen but didn't take his phone. That was all Rose wanted. She called the last number on his cell phone. The number was saved as Anthony, gas installer, but when she called, a young woman's voice answered. "Hi, love, miss me already? You should sleep here tonight and make an excuse for Rose." Upon hearing those words, Rose hung up the phone and went to the kitchen. "Love, I need you to buy some things at the supermarket." Kevin found that request strange, but he complied. An hour later, he returned home but couldn't open the doors. "Rose, what's happening?" he shouted. Rose looked through the crack in the door and just said, "I already know everything, you traitor," and went back inside. When Kevin went to the supermarket, Rose urgently called a locksmith and changed all the locks on her house. The following days were difficult for Rose. She suffered from Kevin's absence, even after what he did. Amidst tears and sleepless nights, Rose had a strong dizzy spell and went to the hospital. At the reception, she was very dizzy and nauseous. She spoke only 2 words to the receptionist before fainting. When she woke up, the doctor came to her with a smile. "Congratulations, you're pregnant," the doctor said. "How?" Rose said, disbelieving. In other circumstances, this would have been the news she desired most. Rose had always dreamed of being a mother, but at the moment, she was confused and lost. Carrying the child of her ex-boyfriend who cheated on her didn't make her feel so good. One day her neighbor, an 80-year-old lady, saw Rose and noticed her belly already growing. "Rose, my dear, you're pregnant. There's no greater blessing for a woman than to be a mother," the lady said. Rose thanked her but remained sad. "My child, what happened?" the lady asked. Rose opened up to the lady and told her everything that had happened. "My child, I know the situation is difficult, but think that this child you carry is also yours, and not just this man's who betrayed you. I'm sure God has a great plan for you. He has one for all of us. Cheer up, you'll get through this." After this conversation, Rose felt happier and renewed. She tried to see life from a more positive angle. It was only a few months before she finished medical school. She was already working, and when she graduated, she had a guaranteed job and a salary increase. "I will raise him. I can raise a child alone," she thought positively. Rose was 5 months pregnant and was watering her garden when she felt strong pains in her abdomen. "Is it labor already? It can't be," she thought with concern. After the neighbors heard her cries of pain, an ambulance soon arrived and took her to the hospital. Rose didn't understand what was happening, but she felt that something was wrong. After several hours in the hospital, Rose received the worst news of her life. She lost her baby. The doctor, with a sad countenance, said, "I'm so sorry. We did everything possible, but you had a hemorrhage, and unfortunately, your uterus was also compromised, and you won't be able to have children again." The 2 pieces of news devastated Rose. She secluded herself at home and practically didn't go out. Neighbors and relatives did everything to bring the young woman back to society, but Rose was in deep sadness. After much insistence from friends and relatives, she consulted a psychologist with whom she had frequent sessions. She tried to get back on her feet, but it seemed that each step was more difficult. Her neighbor always went to her house. She brought sweets, cakes, her lunch, or anything that could make Rose happy. One day, the neighbor went to her and asked if she had any food or clothes she didn't use. "Why the question, Mrs. Miller?" Rose asked. The elderly woman held up a small bag full of clothes in good condition that she no longer used. "These clothes are for charity. I go to an institution every week, and lately, they've been needing a lot of help." Rose, even disheartened, looked in her wardrobe for old clothes in good condition, food, and even an old doll she found. She gave everything to Mrs. Miller, who now had 2 full bags in her hands. "Mrs. Miller, can you carry all this?" Rose asked, worried about the weight she was carrying. "One step at a time, I can, my dear." Rose, despite her state, couldn't let an 80-year-old woman carry such a heavy bag. "I'll take it, ma'am." "Let's go in my car," Rose said. Mrs. Miller smiled and accepted. This was the first time Rose had left her house in 3 months. After a 10-minute drive, the two arrived at a charitable institution that housed cancer patients who came from the countryside for treatment in the city and had nowhere to stay. They were very humble people. Rose felt her heart ache. She saw children in wheelchairs, elderly people in bed in terminal condition, mothers carrying their sick children. She realized that her pain was not the only one in this world. When delivering the clothes and food, one action made Rose cry. A girl of about 6 years old approached Rose and kept looking at Rose's doll. The doll had no hair, just like the girl. Rose knelt to the child's height and gave her the doll. "Here, it's yours. Take good care of it," Rose said. The girl hugged Rose and then walked away, playing with the doll. Rose cried. That hug made her release everything that was trapped inside her. Rose started doing more and more charity work. It made her feel alive, and at the same time, she made the lives of people in difficulty a little easier. When she was leaving a charity bazaar, she found 2 women handing out pamphlets. On them was written the importance of donating blood and marrow. "You can save a life," they said. And so Rose did. That same day, she donated marrow and blood. For months, her life went on normally until she received a call. "Good morning, Ms. Rose. You are a compatible marrow donor." The news overjoyed Rose. She could really save someone's life. Rose went to the hospital, and after a simple procedure, she donated marrow. After that, her days went on normally. Rose was increasingly recovering from everything she had been through. On a beautiful sunny day, someone knocked on her door. Rose went to the door and noticed a man she had never seen in her life. When she opened the door, she said, "Good morning, how can I help you?" "Good morning," the man said. "I know this might seem strange, but I just wanted to thank you for what you did for me." Rose was confused, and the man noticed her confusion. "Sorry," he said. "My name is Luke. I'm the one who received your marrow." Rose's eyes widened in astonishment. She thought the donor and recipient were kept secret. Once again the man spoke. "I know it's wrong, but I had some friends who got into the system and revealed who the donor was. I felt so much gratitude for this person and wanted to thank them from the bottom of my heart. I owe you my life." "Thank you very much," Luke said and then walked away. But Rose then spoke, almost shouting because he was already far away. "Don't you want to come in? I made cookies." He smiled and said, "It would be a pleasure, ma'am." Rose laughed. "Don't call me ma'am. We're the same age, and I'm not even 30 yet." The conversation was pleasant. Rose and Luke noticed they had much more in common than they imagined. Luke told her his whole life story, the discovery of the illness, and how his recovery was going. Rose developed an affection for Luke, who visited her at her home more and more. Rose also told him her whole life story and about the tragic loss of her baby. Luke listened to her speak, and his heart ached. "I'm so sorry. You would have been a great mother," he said. "Today, that's what I desire most in the world, to be a mother. When I see a child calling some woman mom, my heart aches, and I sometimes cry. I had already bought clothes for my baby, chosen a name for him, but unfortunately, he couldn't be born into this world." Rose got up in tears and showed Luke a baby outfit. "I had even made it myself, embroidered his name on it, Peter." "Your son's name was Peter?" "Yes," Rose said, crying. Sharing these moments made the two even closer, and soon both fell in love. Their relationship seemed perfect, and Rose felt she had never been as happy as at that moment. But it all lasted a short time. One day, Luke went to her house and said sadly, Rose, I know you're going to hate me, but my ex-girlfriend Olivia contacted me. She's pregnant. I didn't know. I'm so sorry for having to put you through this. Rose received the news like a shock, but she noticed that Luke was sincere in his words. Luke was torn between his love for Rose and his child who was about to be born. But Rose herself pushed him to choose his child. He needs you. I would do anything to have my child back. Raise your child, she said. Luke and Rose shared a farewell kiss, both crying. Before Luke left, Rose gave him the little outfit she had made for her son. Here, I have to move on. Give it to your son when he's born. I know I can't have children, but one day maybe I'll adopt one when I'm healed from all this. You can remove the name from the outfit. No, Luke said. I won't remove the name. Peter is a beautiful name. Luke left, and both lost contact because it was too painful for Rose to be near Luke, knowing he would marry another woman and raise a child with her. Peter was paralyzed after hearing Rose's story. But why did my father lie, saying you're my mother? Why would he do that? It doesn't make sense. Rose looked at him affectionately. Luke knew my desire to have a child, and while he was hospitalized, I imagine he became desperate, not knowing who you would stay with. He must have lied to make you come to me. I say this because if it were my child, I would do the same. So I don't have a mother? Peter said sadly. Rose went to his side. Yes, you have a biological mother and an adoptive mother. My house is your house whenever you wish. I know it might be sudden, but in these few minutes we've been together, I feel as if you were my son. When you called me Mom, I cried because it was something I always dreamed of, but even without being your mother, your voice and your attitude made me cry. What do you mean, you're a mother? Peter asked. Before Rose could speak, his question was answered when a young boy and a young girl, both 12 years old, came home shouting, Mom! Laura, Jonah, how was school? Mommy was talking with some friends, and I'll talk to you in a bit. Soon after, the two went up to their rooms. I adopted 2 children a few years ago, but this house is big, and there's one more available room, Rose said, smiling. Peter smiled and hugged Rose. Before that, I want you to tell me something, Peter said. Do you know my biological mother? Rose looked thoughtful. I don't know her personally, but your father talked a lot about her, and from what he told me, she was a very unpleasant person. Maybe that's why he didn't want you to meet or live with her. But if she still lives in the same place, I know the address. I need to meet her, Peter said. Then let's go, Rose said. Rose, Peter, and Daniel drove to Olivia's old address, Peter's biological mother. They arrived at a very run-down house that looked like it would collapse with any strong wind. There was only one man inside who appeared to be drunk. Olivia isn't here. Don't come asking me for money she owes. If you want to collect from her, she's working at the Baramlung on the corner. They went to the bar, but Peter stayed outside, and only Rose and Daniel went in. A few minutes later, the two came out of the place accompanied by Olivia. Hi, kid. Sorry about your dad, she said coldly. Hi, Mom, Peter said. You're not looking for money, are you? I'll tell you right now, I don't have money to pay child support, she said, looking around and barely looking the boy in the eyes. No, I don't want child support. I just wanted to know how you were doing. Olivia looked him in the eyes this time. I'm fine, kid. But tell me, did your dad leave any inheritance? Peter, even though young, understood why his father had kept him away from her. Peter took a deep breath. No, actually, he left a lot of debts, and since I'm a minor, I think you'll have to pay. Olivia's eyes widened, and she ran off, saying she wouldn't pay anything. Daniel and Rose were apprehensive about how Peter would react after this attitude from his mother. However, Peter burst out laughing seeing that woman run off after he told that lie. The boy had a fit of laughter until he got into Rose's car. After he stopped laughing, he looked at Rose and asked with a big smile, Is there really a spare room in your house? Rose also burst out laughing. Of course, there is. It's all yours. Just no girls in your room and no noise after 11, okay? I accept the conditions, Peter said, smiling. The adoption process was quick. Rose was a renowned doctor who had already adopted 2 children. Having a third was a natural and familiar process for her. Peter got along well with his siblings and with Rose, whom he now called Mom. He realized that bonds as strong as blood ties existed, invisible but unbreakable. 2 years later, Peter went to the state prison. He was nervous, but he needed to do this. He entered a room where there were some chairs. Wearing an orange prison jumpsuit was Daniel. When Daniel saw him, he lowered his head but soon looked him in the eyes again. Peter spoke seriously. "Hello, Daniel." "Hi, Peter," Daniel said. Peter sighed. "So it was you who hit me?" Daniel lowered his head. "Yes, it was me. Why did you never tell me?" Peter said more seriously. Daniel looked up at the ceiling this time. He remembered the day of the accident. He was fiddling with his cell phone when he heard the noise. At first, he thought it was a dog or another animal, but when he saw it was a child, he despaired. As a caregiver, he knew he should provide first aid, but his fear was greater. He drove fast, like he had never done in his life. Daniel spent days consumed by guilt. That boy's face wouldn't leave his mind. Is he alive? Will they catch me? Will I be arrested? It was destroying him from the inside. Until one night, he saw the same boy outside the hospital, at night and alone. At first, he thought it was a ghost, but then he realized the boy was real. The wheelchair he was in was his fault. Daniel laughed then at the coincidence. I'm being punished for what I did, he thought. But after seeing what Peter went through, Daniel tried to transform his regret into redemption. Although he thought he would never be forgiven, Daniel quit the job that paid well to go to the orphanage and take care of Peter. He helped him find his mother and even get adopted. After Rose's adoption, Daniel still felt guilty and realized there was only one way for it to disappear. He confessed what he did. He had been in prison for 2 years now. Daniel looked at Peter. Why did you come to visit me after 2 years? Peter looked thoughtful. I tried to hate you, and for a moment, I succeeded. But all that came to my mind were the good times we spent together, the advice you gave me, when you protected me from the other children at the orphanage. I tried to be angry with you, but I couldn't. He ended in tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Peter looked at him and said, I don't know if you deserve it, but I'm giving you my forgiveness. Peter smiled. Daniel couldn't believe it. After putting you in a wheelchair, you still treat me well? Peter, you're not human. You can only be an angel. An angel, I am not. I just try to be a better person than yesterday, Peter said. And I think you've suffered enough wearing that tacky orange jumpsuit. It must be worse than being locked up here. Daniel laughed. He couldn't believe this boy. The world doesn't deserve you, Peter, Daniel said. Peter smiled. When are you getting out of here? We have a lot to catch up on, Peter said enthusiastically. Next year, maybe. The two talked a little more, and the time was up. Next week I'll come here, but first, I want to show you something. Daniel was curious. Then he couldn't believe his eyes. Peter stood up from the wheelchair and, with difficulty, walked towards him. But his steps were firm and demonstrated his victory. When you get out of here next year, I'll already be walking, and I want us both to walk to my house, deal? Daniel couldn't stop crying. Seeing Peter walking was what he most desired in life. It was like seeing a miracle before his eyes. Deal, Daniel said with a smile of happiness and redemption.